my mother said, not even looking up from the pile of gourmet cupcakes she was arranging on the tier display stand. Jessica has always been more dedicated to her studies. You've always had other interests. My parents paid off my twins' medical school debt and ignored me, so I let the world see who the true doctor in the family is. She deserves it more, honey. I stood in my parents' kitchen, my medical school diploma still in its frame, trying to take in what I had just heard. Mum and I both graduated with honors, and our GPAs were exactly the same. I spoke steadily, but my hands were shaking a little. I don't understand why you and Dad would pay off all of Jessica's loans, but none of mine. Finally, my mother sighed, looking up at me. I nearly burst out laughing when I said, "Your sister doesn't have a wealthy mentor like Dr. Fleming taking an interest in her future." Dr. Vivian Fleming was my research advisor because I had earned that position through 80-hour weeks in the lab, and Jessica was skiing in Aspen during that time with our parents. I asked, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. I'm being punished for finding my own mentorship opportunities. My father came in and put an arm around my mother's shoulders. No one is punishing you, Audrey. We're just being practical. Your sister needs more. I worked myself to exhaustion while my twin sister received our parents' unwavering emotional and financial support while traveling across the nation for Jessica's volleyball tournaments. They used the word resourceful to explain why they never attended my undergraduate research presentations and why. Jessica received a new car for her 21st birthday while I was given a gift card to a gas station. Help than you do. You've always been more resourceful, celebrating Jessica's achievement as if graduating medical school. Debt-free had been her accomplishment rather than our parents' financial decision, the invitations read. I need to head out, I said, finally gathering my courage. Tomorrow was Jessica's debt-free celebration party, which my parents had planned, and they had invited friends, family, and even some of our former professors. Will you still be able to attend Jessica's party tomorrow despite working an early shift at the Although the prospect made my stomach turn. As I made my way to my vehicle, my twin sister Jessica and I had been on strangely different paths. And when my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Fleming saying, I need to speak with you urgently about the Patterson Fellowship, big old realization that my parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair. The pattern was solidified when we both declared our intention to pursue medicine. I was quiet due to stop what was coming. According to family legend, I arrived first when we were born, and she followed 6 minutes later. I was quiet and perceptive, and Jessica made her arrival known with loud, healthy sobs, which may have set the tone for everything that transpired during our childhood in Cleveland. Jessica was the gregarious twin who made friends easily and was very good at sports. While I was in high school, the pattern was solidified when we both declared our intention to pursue medicine. I was quieter and more bookish, spending hours in our local library learning about everything from astronomy to zoology. Our parents attended all of Jessica's soccer matches and dance recitals, and my science fair triumphs earned a quick pat on the head and "Good job, Audrey." Although my parents seemed happy for Jessica, they were worried about the workload and whether I could handle the pressure. Medical school requires more than just intelligence, Audrey. As my father had warned, it also requires grit and determination. Jessica has always put in more effort, and the irony was painful because I maintained a perfect GPA while working during my undergraduate studies at Ohio State. Jessica needed costly tutors to help her with organic chemistry and physics, so our parents paid for them part-time. When she had to retake the MCAT, they paid for a premium preparation course. And when I scored in the 98th percentile on my first try, they just nodded and said, "That's nice, dear." In spite of everything, we were accepted to the same medical school in Michigan, and for 4 years we studied together and supported one another. I resented Jessica because she was my sister, my twin, and I loved her. She didn't cause our parents' favoritism. Instead, she benefited from it. And occasionally I even thought she felt uneasy about their obvious preference, arduous rotations, and acknowledged each other's accomplishments. I hoped that at last our parents would recognize our equal accomplishments. However, they continued to minimize my accomplishments and highlight Jessica's when I was chosen to present research at a national conference. Coincidentally, Jessica had won a community service award that same weekend. Guess which event our parents attended? Well, Everything changed in our senior year when renowned neurosurgeon, Dr. Vivian Fleming, noticed my research on pediatric traumatic brain injuries. Under her guidance, I thrived for the first time. I had someone who saw my potential and encouraged me to succeed, not in spite of my personality, but because of it. You have a gift for research, Audrey. Dr. Fleming once said to me, if only my parents could see me the way she does, they would see that you see patterns that others miss, and that kind of insight cannot be taught. I saw Dr. Fleming in her office the morning of Jessica's celebration. She was a beautiful woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that never missed anything. The walls of her office were my heart raced for weeks as I waited to learn about the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins, the most prestigious neurosurgical research position in the world. Sit down, she said, indicating the chair across from her desk. I have extraordinary news. The room was covered with awards, published papers, and pictures of medical luminaries from all over the world. Country, only one graduating medical student nationwide would receive it. The committee has made their decision on the Patterson Fellowship, Dr. Fleming said, wearing a carefully neutral expression. I held my breath. But they've selected you, she said, breaking into a wide smile. Congratulations, Dr. Audrey Collins. You're going to Baltimore. Validation swept over me in waves, and I'm not sure how to respond. I stammered. You earned this, Dr. Fleming said firmly. Your research on neurovascular regeneration following traumatic injury was groundbreaking, and the committee was especially impressed with your dual approach combining. I've been invited to Jessica's celebration tonight. And Dr. Fleming kept her eyes sparkling. The fellowship combined surgical innovation with pharmaceutical intervention, and it included a generous stipend, housing allowance, and most importantly, complete loan forgiveness. I would be debt-free like Jessica, but through my own merit rather than parental favoritism. As a courtesy, your parents invited the faculty, who were unaware of our mentorship. If you're okay with it, I'd like to share the news about the fellowship there. My stomach dropped. I don't know, Dr. Fleming. It's supposed to be Jessica's night, and my parents might interpret it as me trying to steal her spotlight. Dr. Fleming's expression hardened a little. As I've noticed, I understand your reluctance, but sometimes acknowledgement must be made public in order to be acknowledged at all. She was correct, of course. If my parents had learned about the fellowship in private, they would have found a way to downplay it, or blame it on luck. I have witnessed your family dynamic over the past 2 years at hospital functions. Instead, I nodded slowly so you can make the announcement. As I was leaving her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica's mom saying, I'm going overboard for tonight. It's embarrassing. I wished she had taken the time to celebrate our graduation together. I stared at the message, perplexed, because it was the first time Jessica had ever acknowledged our parents' unfair treatment. Before I could come up with a reply, my mother texted me again, saying, remember to dress professionally tonight, and give your sister her moment. It's very important to her. The contrast between the two messages was startling. Maybe I had been mistaken about Jessica all along, and maybe tonight would show the truth about my parents. My parents had rented out the entire rooftop terrace at an upscale restaurant in downtown Detroit for Jessica's debt-free celebration, which was avoided for 26 years. It was an extravagant event that must have cost thousands of dollars. As I exited the elevator, I was met by a large banner that read, Congratulations, Dr. Jessica, without mentioning that there were actually 2 Dr. Collinses in the room. Family. I straightened my navy blue dress and inhaled deeply, because this was Jessica's night. No matter what Dr. Fleming decided to say, I wouldn't allow years of animosity to destroy my bond with my twin, Audrey. Jessica saw me leaving a gathering of family members to come over right away. She looked gorgeous in a silver cocktail dress and had blonde hair just like mine. Despite my nervousness, I laughed when Aunt Patty asked me 5 times if I had a boyfriend. I told her that I'm married to medicine, but if she knows any qualified neurosurgeons, I'm taking applications. Jessica did, however, put her arm through mine, in color, but cut in a trendy bob, while I kept mine long and styled perfectly. Thank God you're here. The unscrupulous mom invited half of the medical school dean, Wilson, to attend. I looked around the packed terrace and saw the dean talking to our father. Wow, they really went all out. It's embarrassing. Jessica lowered her voice, and the not in my stomach slightly relaxed. Perhaps Jessica was more aware than I had given her credit. The Hendersons have just arrived, and you remember Thomas Henderson, the chief of surgery at Cleveland Memorial. She took Jessica's arm, effectively separating us, and then looked back at me. Audrey, could you please check if the caterers have set out the gluten-free options? Your cousin Beck is being challenging. As Jessica was paraded before hospital administrators, I was relegated to catering management. Some things remained the same though, as I was guiding the waitstaff to the appropriate table when Dr. Fleming arrived. She looked stunning in a crimson pantsuit, commanding attention without having to work, and she said, warmly embracing me, Are you prepared for our announcement? I'm not sure I acknowledge that the timing seems off. Dr. Fleming looked around. The party, taking in the banner, the expertly decorated cake with just Jessica's name on it, and the slideshow of pictures that showed Jessica in the spotlight, with me occasionally in the background. I noticed she said something in a quiet voice that was more intricate than I had thought. My stomach knotted as I watched my parents introduce Jessica to Dr. Margaret Wu, the chief neurosurgeon at Detroit Medical Center, where Jessica and I had applied for residency positions. Were they attempting to obtain a spot for Jessica through personal connections? Dr. Fleming, my father, had spotted her and was now coming over with my mother and Jessica in tow. Honored to have you join us. I know you've worked with Audrey on some projects. Dr. Fleming raised an eyebrow. Audrey has been my main research partner for the past 2 years, and her contribution to our study on traumatic brain injury was crucial to its success. My parents exchanged a look that I couldn't quite understand. How nice, my mother said, ambiguously, and Jessica has also been I felt a flush of rage rising in my cheeks when Dr. Wu expressed her admiration for Jessica's application to her program. Jessica hadn't done neurosurgical research. Instead, her focus was neuropsychiatry, a completely different field, and her parents were flagrantly misrepresenting her experience, possibly at the expense of my own opportunities. Dr. Fleming's face stayed friendly, but I noticed a steely gleam in her eyes. How intriguing. I thought Jessica was more interested in psychiatric applications than surgical procedures. An awkward silence descended upon our small group, and my hope was in closing. This announcement was only going to make things worse, not better. The evening's dinner portion began with my parents, Jessica, our grandparents, and Dr. Wu seated at the head table. I was seated at a secondary table with cousins and family friends, close enough to listen in on the conversation, but not to join in. We always knew Jessica was destined for greatness, as my father had told Dr. Wu, even when the girls were young. Demonstrated such tenacity. She has always been our ambitious one. Happy for Jessica. They were worried about the workload and whether I could handle the pressure. Medical weeks as I waited to learn about the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins, the most prestigious neurosurgical research position in the world. Sit down, she said, indicating. As many of you are aware, medical school is a demanding journey, and to graduate not only with a degree, but also. I started locking my bedroom door, and Megan started leaving. I stood up and said, I'd like to say something, looking directly at me with an apologetic expression. We knew that she would make us proud, so we invested in her future. I stared at my plate, hot tears threatening to spill over. My mother whispered, This isn't the time. It's exactly the time. Jessica insisted that I can't accept recognition that excludes my sister. It's not right, and it's not right, and I felt a silence descend upon the crowd. Audrey and I both graduated with identical GPAs, and to be honest, Audrey worked harder because she did it without the support system. After all these years, when Jessica was publicly admitting the imbalance, it was both heartbreaking and vindicating. My father's voice was overly cheerful, but he recovered quickly. Of course, we're proud of both of our girls. Audrey has done incredibly well, but tonight is about celebrating Jessica's debt-free status, which is a special occasion. Jessica retorted, Achievement? An achievement you facilitated, not one I earned. Her authoritative voice was firm but steady, and the tension in the room was evident. This was rapidly turning into the scene my parents had always feared would occur. The ideal family image crumbling in public. Dr. Fleming chose that moment to stand. If I might add something to this conversation, she said, Audrey's research on neurovascular regeneration has earned her the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins. which Dr. Fleming announced is the single most prestigious position offered to a graduating medical student. My parents exchanged anxious looks, and through the murmurs, "This seems like a good time to share some news about Audrey that many of you may not be aware of. Student in the nation, which includes complete loan forgiveness and a sizable stipend." As Dr. Wu looked at me with fresh interest and my cousins whispered excitedly, Dr. Fleming went on to mention that the selection committee had specifically cited Audrey's novel dual approach methodology, which she developed largely on her own. I've had the honor of mentoring many up-and-coming doctors while juggling a full clinical rotation schedule, but I've rarely seen the level of commitment and wisdom that Audrey consistently exhibits. The room erupted in genuine, enthusiastic applause for me, with people turning in their seats to stare at me with smiles and respectful nods. My parents remained, when they realized that their carefully crafted story about their daughters was publicly unraveling. Their expressions froze, in a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning horror. Jessica was beaming at me, with no trace of jealousy in her eyes. Dr. Fleming wasn't done, and I'm happy to say that I personally made arrangements for the rest of Audrey's. After Dr. Fleming's announcement, the celebration drastically changed, with faculty members who had previously gravitated toward Jessica now supporting medical school loans to be covered through our department's Merit Scholarship Fund. This decision was unanimously approved by the board in recognition of her extraordinary contributions to our research program. I was also in debt, but I had earned it. They were now coming up to me to ask about my research and to congratulate me on the fellowship. A number of my clinical supervisors told me glowing stories about my work with patients that I was unaware of, and they even noticed my parents, who were still at their table in shock, clearly not only processing the news of my loan forgiveness and fellowship but also witnessing the "Congratulations, sis," Jessica said, clinking her glass against mine. "The Patterson Fellowship, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me?" Dismantling the narrative they'd constructed about their daughters. The quiet, self-sufficient twin they'd consistently overlooked was now the center of professional admiration. I added, "I didn't want to ruin your celebration, and I only found out this morning. I attempted to convince them that this silly party was Mom and Dad's idea, not mine, but you know how they are after they've chosen anything you did. So I inquired in surprise." Jessica scowled. "Naturally I did," and Jessica looked hurt. "I've always known that they treated us differently, but I wasn't sure how to address it without making matters worse." Before I could reply, Dr. Margaret Wu came up to us, Dr. Collins, and she said, "I was very impressed by Dr. Fleming's account of your research. We should discuss whether you'd consider bringing your work to our." I was surprised to see the neurosurgery department rather than Johns Hopkins. "That's very flattering, Dr. Wu, but she's already accepted the Patterson, Jessica, and she's proudly put her arm around my shoulders. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but my sister never does just one groundbreaking thing at a time, so I'm betting she have another groundbreaking study." Dr. Wu smiled and said, "When you finish the fellowship, keep Detroit in mind. We'd be fortunate." How intrigued. Parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair, it was about. As she left, I turned to Jessica and gasped, "You didn't have to do that. I know you wanted to stay in Detroit for your residency, and I still can," she said. "However, I won't do it by allowing my parents to control the situation or by letting you miss out on opportunities. That's not who I want to be." Across the room, me, and a new experience that was obviously unsettling for them. When they finally reached us, my father said, his tone carefully calibrated to sound proud while masking his confusion, "The Patterson Fellowship is quite an honor. Why didn't you tell us you were even being considered for something so prestigious?" My mother, Jessica muttered, "Ready for this? I didn't really admit that Dr. Fleming had some impressive things to say about you. Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly with a hint of accusation in her voice. "You've made it clear where your interest and support lie." My parents exchanged awkward looks, saying, "That's not fair, Audrey." My father started by saying, "We supported you both differently." My mother quickly interrupted, "You had different needs," and Jessica shook her head. She gave me a meaningful look and said, "We're going to have a real conversation about this soon, all of us." Dr. Fleming then saved me from having to respond by appearing at my elbow. Audrey said, "The dean would like to say something about featuring your fellowship in the alumni magazine." She smiled at my parents, her expression pleasant, but her eyes were steely. I'm very proud to have raised two daughters who are so successful, but I imagine it's especially satisfying to see Audrey's efforts acknowledged after everything she's overcome. The emphasis on overcome was subtle but clear, and my parents managed to look embarrassed. My mother said once a week that we've always known Audrey was unique, but it's too little, too late. The week following the celebration was the medical community in Detroit was shocked to learn of my Patterson Fellowship, and doors that had previously been closed to me suddenly opened. Former professors who had granted Jessica extensions, but denied mine, were now emailing me to congratulate me. And classmates who had hardly acknowledged me during my 4 years of medical school suddenly claimed close friendship with me. My father put a small box on my coffee table and said, "With both of you graduating and starting your careers, we should get you girls something special. We got you this inside." This was a rose gold watch identical to the one they'd given. In the meantime, parents were trying to repair the damage. They had arrived at my apartment the day after the party with gift bags and fake smiles. "It's beautiful, Jessica," and I said it without reaching for it, even though it was a little late. My mother winced. "We know you must feel overlooked sometimes, but everything we did was because we knew you could handle challenges on your own." "That's a convenient narrative," I said, maintaining a steady voice. "But it doesn't explain why you attended her presentations, but ignored mine. Why did you pay for her MCAT preparation course, but advised me to use free internet resources? Why did you pay for her living expenses while she was in medical school, but advised me to take out more loans for myself?" Audrey's father objected, saying we had to make decisions, and yes, you did. You repeatedly selected Jessica as the phone rang, and Dr. Fleming called to discuss my impending move to Baltimore. I answered it gratefully, turning away from my parents' shocked faces. "And yes, I am available to discuss the housing options." My mother's eyes were filled with tears, and she insisted that maybe you do. I agreed, but you haven't treated us equally, and watches and belated recognition won't change that. "I can't believe you're leaving next week. I told Jessica that Detroit won't be the same without you, because you'll be too busy with your residency to notice I'm gone." 3 weeks later, I stood in my empty apartment with the last box packed and ready for the moving company. Jessica sat on the windowsill and watched me tape up a final container of books. Even though it was true that we had been inseparable throughout medical school, our paths were finally diverging, mine to Johns Hopkins, hers to Detroit Medical, and I can't stop wondering what my parents did or didn't do. I suppose that for all these years, I felt fortunate that they gave me more attention, but they were actually preventing me from moving forward. I sat next to her on the windowsill, relying on their approval. "You didn't do anything wrong, Jess, but I didn't do enough right either," she said. "I should have spoken up sooner," she sighed. "They're devastated, you know," she said. "Mom keeps crying about how you must hate them, and Dad's telling everyone who will listen about his brilliant daughter at Johns Hopkins like he personally funded your research." The constant pain of trying to get approval from parents who had never really seen me had finally gone away. Dr. Fleming's mentorship had taught me what true support looked like, pushing me when I needed to push myself, protecting me when I needed to be protected, and always saying, "Let them," surprised me by how little it bothered me now. Always seeing my potential without qualification. So what happens now? I took her hand, and we figured out our own path without the rivalry they made between us. I'd like that Jessica smiled and squeezed my hand. "Dr. Audrey Collins Patterson, Fellow, I'm so proud of you, sis." For the first time in years, I felt totally at peace, even though the road ahead was difficult, transparent and completely up to me to handle on my own terms.